Good morning, and thank you for joining me for the Prospech Limited Investor Webinar. Today, we'll be looking over the recent quarterly report, what's to come in 2025, and be hosting a live Q&A. I'm Jane Morgan, Investor and Media Relations Manager, and today I'm joined by Managing Director, Mr. Jason Beckton. Jason will be running through an investor presentation followed by a Q&A session. So to ask a question throughout today's webinar, please use the Q&A function, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. But Jason, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you for your company and shareholders and potential shareholders for joining us. We'll start with a slide that is important. It brings a few things through the overall presentation that we're a brownfields play, i.e. we develop old mines, which is what we've done generally in the past as a group. Here at Korsnäs in Western Finland, we have a inferred JORC resource, which we'll talk about shortly, which is part of the very thick news flow last quarter. We have a amenable local community. We're using the facility you can see in front of you, the old mine, to log and administer the project. You can see a drill rig on the bottom right in the with rubber track tyres, which we can drill all through the project area due to the various forestry tracks. And in fact, this rig was able to pump from the mine water you can see in front of you. So quite simple logistics. Moving to the next slide, I will make comments about the resource and also about growth, so please bear that in mind. What we try to do with our shareholders is minimise risk but maximise upside, and to that end, we've invested in a brownfields asset in a mining-friendly jurisdiction. In Finland, also industrial country, including to the south, Estonia, where there's processing facilities, third party. We have importantly, when I say brownfields, it was a lead mine in the past. We'll talk about that and how we've benefited from that previous decades-old lead exploration program, which I guess serendipity-wise found rare earth zones, at least 6, maybe more zones that we're currently on the tip of the iceberg, if as it were, to define in terms of volume and grade at Korsnäs. We'll also refer to our very large gold-silver portfolio that we started with the company when we listed in 2020, and its performance has been very good in terms of a breakthrough recently of defining a low-angle normal fault or a flat structural feature that hosts a third-party producing mine at Rosalia on the right-hand diagram. Again, just like Finland, we're in the EU here and also in the EEC. We're in a part of the world where Western companies are investing, so there's new entrants all the time into the Western Tethyan, in particular Slovakia, and to the south in the Balkans in Serbia. So we're very happy with the gold-silver portfolio. It suffers internal competition to what's happening in Finland, but we're still advancing several gold-silver projects there, including the main Caldera and Pukenec, which we'll refer to shortly. I'd like to point out this project would not have advanced in Finland without the good offices of the Finnish government, including GTK, which is Geological Survey, but also their metallurgical arm, Mintec, which we'll refer to shortly. Because, as I'll get a little bit repetitive on, we try to take shortcuts for shareholders, minimise risk, and basically we've ended up with what is between 10 and $13 million worth of drill core that was drilled by others, that we're sampling in a modern sense, as you can see on the right, with the GTK staff member guiding us on which units are which back in April of 2023. There's also a team member in the photograph in the background, Jacob Bukovina, who's our senior geologist from Slovakia. So we move staff backwards and forwards into jurisdictions to minimise team size. That goes to the cost of the test. Size of the prize I skipped over, but basically, as I referred to earlier, to rare earth and gold-silver projects progressing through the resource. The chances of success, we're increasing those chances already. In my view, the resource graduation from drill results is a sign of success that every company should push through. That in turn will grow along with more drill results this month, including drill results, and then from that, another resource estimate in the near future. Slovakia, we need to drill this low-angle normal fault. There's a proven facsimile or copy of this system of Dundee Precious Metals down in Serbia. So we're right at a paradigm shift there in Slovakia as well of needing to drill out the high-grade mine horizon. Returning to Finland, Korsnäs, like every company, you have a focus. Korsnäs is the focus because within Korsnäs itself, there's 3 competing resource target areas. If we take for granted the fact that it was an old mine in the past, as per the first bullet point, it was a lead mine. And we don't judge that. It was the late 60s, early 70s. Rare earths wasn't a focus for anybody back then. But importantly, the very competent people at Outokumpu knew that there was rare earth mineralisation in almost every single drill hole. And there's 471 at the moment. We keep finding more that are undocumented and putting them in the system. They're all in 3D. They were logged very well in the past, so we haven't needed to re-log them, but they have been re-assayed and continue to be re-assayed. Although I'd mentioned that process is coming to at least a hiatus, not a complete process, but it's at a hiatus in that we want to draw a line through it and grow the resource to a certain point. Then there's internally, there's other projects such as a tailings storage facility, which was, of course, if the processing plant wasn't producing for rare earths, there's a lot of remnant rare earths, and we've discussed an exploration target, as you can see in the next bullet point in the past with the ASX. And that is reasonably accurate because it's easy to model a flat tabular feature that's above ground and there's already broken dirt. So a lot of the grant money we'll talk about later that's coming in from the EU now is linked to this possibility of processing these formerly mined zones. When there's also a very small lanthanide dump, it has value. We don't want to overstate that. We've drilled it with auger drilling, for want of a better word, and we're looking at how to evaluate that further. It's a sweetener off the side. It might we don't really see that as a competitor for the importance of the hard rock target and the tailings target. So coming to the hard rock target, which is the focus of value, as I've said a few times, it's already been drilled. We'd like to do more drilling, and we have done some in August, as the shareholders are aware of, with some excellent results, particularly in the central and southern areas. We have completely open western areas and to the north as well. So there is still a lot of scope for more drilling, which we'll phase after some initial metallurgical results, which we'll talk about shortly. The fact is, when I've done this before in Chile and elsewhere, is you utilize every bit of historical information you can to save shareholders money, and we spice that with modern drilling. And bear in mind, every single assay we've used in the resource is a modern assay from 2023 onwards from us. We've expended approximately 400,000 euros on assay work. We calculated it yesterday, and in my view, that's excellent value for a resource of this size. The cutoff, which we deem appropriate, although it needs more work with more metallurgical and processing work, which is underway, is set at 0.5% total rare earth, which generates, as you can see there, 7 million tonnes at over 1% total rare earth. There's some spikes in that, of course, but importantly, there's also a focus on the high value rare earth oxides, neodymium, praseodymium, terbium, dysprosium, which you can see highlighted there, which are in significant numbers. It's because the market may not be aware that some rare earths are not particularly valuable, such as lanthanum and cerium. Importantly, we modelled at the same time, and we didn't fill them with inferred blocks, but we modelled an exploration target in 3D, and that will be the immediate source of further growth in the next resource estimate, which is what's called a JORC exploration target, which is between 10 and 12 million tonnes at between 1 and 1.2% rare earth. So we see a lot of growth forwards on the tonnage side of things. The grade will remain largely static, I think, which is an excellent grade anyway for this kind of resource near surface, processable. So largely processable probably. We think that the growth side of things is immediate, and shareholders will benefit from that in the near term. When I say immediate, we're talking about more assays from I don't know if you can see my cursor there, but more assays from these drill holes that we've sampled that are coming in, particularly this northwestern sector and the southern sector. There's 5 highlighted here, but there's at least 6 zones. We haven't got any drilling to the north really, that was just logistical from the previous operators where they kept hitting rare earths but no lead, so they stopped drilling north of the tailings dam, which is here. We believe, we know that these are thick, high-grade open zones to the north, but they'll require modern drilling to grow the resource there and to populate the empty exploration target. So we have significant zones of growth immediately from once we've got all these assays in terms of the probable inferred resource coming up. I think that I don't want to sort of underplay the importance of the opportunity here for shareholders. This is a real option on, unlike a lot of assets out there. This A is hard rock and can be processed. There's no there's metallurgical work to be done, but B, the assaying work is modern. So arguably the asset with more modern drilling will be promoted to, the hard rock asset anyway, be promoted to indicated beyond inferred. However, first things first, we want to find the limits of the 6 zones, and in my view, that's going to be represented with even more assays, as you can see here, reported last quarter, in the coming days and weeks for PRS, and that was flagged in the quarterly that we've got more assays to come in the news flow. So the top 2 intercepts you can see there is modern drilling that shareholders paid for in August. Importantly, the grant money from the EU largely covers the metallurgical work. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then you have separately, but also mixed with it, the far more numerous, i.e. 471 holes, and about half of those done to date of rare earth sampling in a modern sense. So that mix of data, it's data-rich project, hence the term brownfields, which goes to the next slide. The coloured, the magenta colours is what pulls your eye in. That's the high grade above 1% blocks and rare earths. You can see they're artificially stopped in a number of locations. That's us being conservative because we want more drilling, or we await assays from the drilling of these black lines, which have already been completed. There's no planned holes on these. These are holes that already exist. And so you can see we need to get the assays back for a lot of these holes, and then we can extend the resource. There's certainly work to be done on more drilling to the north, as I alluded to grow the resource there. But the overall message I want shareholders to take away is that the resource is at a low base, and basically it's a linear process from here. The resource information also needs not just quantity growth that I talk about a lot, but quality growth, and that therein lies the parallel effort of the metallurgical work. Importantly, we should benchmark with third parties, as we did in the resource estimate in December. The bubble size is in relation to market cap, and I don't speculate on market cap, but I just compare with current market cap with third parties. We can see that, as I mentioned, it's likely this circle, whatever the market cap size, but it will move upward on this graph in terms of tonnage from the 7 million tonne point here on the graph. 7's about this point here. I would hope we move up and convert in the future most of the exploration target to inferred, although of course, as per JORC regulation, that's not guaranteed, but that is our unabashed goal. I don't think we'll grow in this direction particularly. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. That's not our style. But we will certainly be looking to be a bigger bubble in this part of the world in the future. It's important that the shareholders know that the board has a clear vision for the asset. And we have retained the gold silver projects. We don't want shareholders to think that we're, if you like, stopping work on what is, I think, the best gold silver project I've ever been involved with in my 30-year career in terms of the opportunity. We have been aggressive with, not quite, but almost a first mover basis on the exploration here. There's third parties in here now, particularly the critical minerals push. But we're interested in gold, silver here mainly because it's easy to process. We're adjacent to an operating mine at Hadrusha that produces approximately 10 million euros a year profit. And that they're not explorers, so we surround that mine to the west anyway, and we have standing targets that are competing with our efforts in Finland. One of the great things about the EU, and in particular Slovakia, is the ultra-tech or high-tech nature of the country. This moonscape, if you like, is in fact a thick forest, a black forest like you'd see in Germany. However, it's forestry. We're allowed to drill there. Other parties in the past have drilled there, in this case Argosy in the early 90s. We're following their good work. And we think that there'll be a solid drill program here, we hope, depending on budget, May, June, after some more work, metallurgical work in Finland. So what I would say is this is not an abandoned project. We want to go flat out here. I'll be there later in the month. And we can see the pockmarks there are one of approximately 8,000 workings. We don't get, they define where the zones are, where they change strike, etc. So we don't equate that to endowment, but it certainly gives us a guide as where these structures are, and that's what previous operators could see with their trenching. You can see with those red and magenta colours. So there's some open high grades here. We'd like to see gold over 1 gram and silver over 100. So we'll work on these high grade zones within these flexure zones as we've done in the past and other epithermal projects in the group's successful background. I think that, and arguably you lead with it, but I like to close with the most important next step, and that's that metallurgy is underway. We've got initial characterization work being completed at 3 locations with 2 sample subsets. You can see on the top right, John Levings is not in the photograph, but I think he took it. One of our directors, Mark Stemson, a metallurgical consultant on the right, and our manager second from the images left is Pekka Pessanen, and they're visiting the GTK facility in Espoo, Helsinki. That's our core. It's just been scanned for all minerals. We've already seen some progress in defining a allanite and apatite zones that are separate and probably have separate processing routes in all probability. That material's just been sent off for destructive testing in another GTK facility in the town of Outokumpu itself, the GTK Mintech, so results from that are due in the near future. And then there's separately to that again is the tailing samples have been sent up to University of Oulu. These things were all highlighted to some extent anyway in the quarterly, and we need to get those results to shareholders as soon as possible. But we are pushing very hard, and thanks to the grant from the EU, because this work is being paid for by third parties for shareholders' sake. So it's a good outcome for all concerned, all stakeholders in the end. Drilling, we need to report a total of 800 samples. At the moment, they're all in the lab. We expect all of them to be back by the end of March. However, some will be shortly, as per the comment about early February. Yoki Kangas, which is another rare earth project in the north, we're looking at some additional work there to consolidate and move forward on what is a competitive rare earth project, in fact, with coarseness. So we're trying to build a company here that will, if not dominate, but be very important in the northern EU with respect to rare earths. And Slovakia, as I've just said, is a sitting duck in terms of some high-grade gold-silver drilling that we need to complete this calendar year, or want to complete this calendar year rather than need. In terms of market parameters, we're at a reasonably low ebb in terms of the history of the company's market cap. Arguably, that is an opportunity for folks to come in and have a look at us. Importantly, they should know that we are in receipt, as we've spoken about a few times, of non-dilutionary EU funds. So the 700,000 odd that we received in December is the EU doesn't receive shares for that at this stage. The next phases they may do. They're welcome to be on the register, but at this point, the work is advancing the project regardless, and we are in the middle of a cap raise. And I'll encourage you to contact me if there's some interest on that in terms of a shortfall placement. So enterprise value, I won't say whether it's high or low. Obviously, all directors should want things to increase. And that's the best way is with solid results, as you'll see soon with metallurgy and drilling. And in time, resource growth. So, Jane, I might give the listeners a welcome respite from my voice and return to yourself.
Absolutely. If you could just maybe stop sharing your screen, we will jump into some questions. And again, I encourage people to use the Q&A function, which can be found at the bottom of your screen, if you do have questions for Jason. But look, I might kick things off probably more broadly, and we did touch on this. But so last year, 2024, was a significant year for the company. Do you want to just maybe highlight some of the key achievements that we made over that year?
Well, I think when we had 2023 April, I guess, is the start of when we diversified into Finland. And we had been in a separate entity chasing Finland since about 2017. But importantly, a few risks that were allayed or dealt with was the status of that large drill core asset, I guess. And well, not guess, I know, I was very concerned that it would be in a good state. It was in an immaculate state, a very surprising effort by the government in the last 50 years to preserve all that core. So that was an achievement to start sampling that, negotiate with the government on the amount we needed to be sampled, because I don't think they've had a company send so much for cutting with the government. So we, in fact, had to use a third-party contractor in northern Finland to help us deal with the amount of material that we wanted sampled. And the pleasing thing is that's coming to an end, because we did choke the system, for want of a better word. That led directly to resource. So I guess that the main achievement in December, which was pleasing, equity response or not, the pleasing outcome was a resource result that was arguably positive. Anything above, I think, 1% is good. If it was 0.5% resource, it would be a bit of a worry, maybe unminable. No, I'm not a planning engineer, but overall, I don't think we could have come up with that resource much cheaper, because basically it was geologists quickly deciding which areas were sampled. As I've said earlier, we didn't need to do a PhD on the geology, because that's what worries me on my personal account when someone says the geology is complex. These are tabular bodies that are stacked, and almost, well, I don't want to simplify the concerns of resource geologists, but it's almost boring geology. You can see it easily. It's a white zone. And the outcome for the year was definitely, that was the best result. And yeah, I won't ramble on, but it was a big year.
Look, so just on this then, and the recent entitlement offer is obviously of interest to everybody on the call. Do you want to maybe perhaps discuss the financial position of the company, and while we're there, maybe also just discuss the EU grant funding as well?
Sure. So pleasingly, we raised just shy of 800,000 Australian in December, the rights issue component. Canaccord, as is public, is engaged to complete the shortfall placement by 21 February. Mathematically, quite a task when our share price is below the offer price, but that we seek to rectify that with results shortly. The other important point shareholders should know is the grant money has been starting to be deployed to the metallurgy work. So that 700,000 is largely insulated from that spend. It's quite expensive work, metallurgy work, and all wages in Finland, for example, are covered by the EU grant. So our cash burn is quite low. We do monitor things like there's 4 cent options we have in April, etc., and refreshment periods on the shares. So I was just in Sydney on Monday, and we're certainly, if you like, intent on making sure we maximise news flow. And we certainly don't warehouse information. As soon as the assays come to hand, we report them. I think that my comments about impending news flow are because we're actually working out the wrinkles of those numbers now and about to publish them.
Thank you for that, Jason. So just going to move, actually speaking of that, so the network, we might just start with the testing collaboration that we've got with RemHub. Do you want to just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so it was very unusual to get a grant at this stage of a project's life. Most grants, particularly here in Australia, for example, help you build a plant when a project's already de-risked. So that's no use to a company like us. We need funding at the sort of large investment stage or building stage. And EU for the first time recognised that we were near resource. So importantly, we received the grant before the resource came out, so it wasn't contingent on that. This shows their intent to push this thing through the hoops, the EU. When I say they, there's various committees and bureaucracies, as you can imagine, which is fair enough with deployment of public funds. We are now a positive recipient of a grant, so that sort of lends itself to trust and the ability to receive further funds should the project warrant it, and it certainly does. We don't see this as being a large chemistry set, a difficult thing to build. Rare earth oxides float quite well at coarseness in previous test work, so that is why. However, we of course need to confirm that in a modern sense, so that's why there's 2 sample streams. A tailings dam material over 200 kilograms been sent north last week. It's already being worked on. And the hard rock material, which is past one phase, which is due for reporting, and is now being sent to the next phase of the same entity, and importantly, a government entity called GTK Mintech, who we have contracts with. And they're working on at the moment shortly at the Outokumpu facility, which is brand new. And government people are in touch, I would say, weekly with us on if we need more support, etc. And it's actually material support, so they're putting their best people on it, which is great. We're very fortunate.
Thanks, Jason. Where you can answer this. So what about the lib scanning and micro XRF analysis? Can you give us a little bit of the findings that we're seeing there?
Yeah, so the modern technology these days, as a lot of field and metallurgy people know, has been very helpful. Apart from the gadgetry, it's actually intervenes earlier than the past on what program should happen next, because you always have that first phase of characterization. What is the mineral really? Because one of the summarizing pieces of assay information, it tells you the elements, like neodymium, but it doesn't tell you what mineral that element's stored in, and hence for the metallurgical engineers how to extract the element from the mineral. And so the key point about the scanning work is it's already defined. It's geologically constrained. There's probably 2 zones, as we alluded to in the quarterly, an alunite silicate zone and an apatite phosphorus zone, different grade characteristics, and that's positive. That'll help refine the resource in the future as well. So the work kind of goes backwards and forwards. Iterative forwards, sure, it advances, but what it means is we go back, refine the resource into the 2 zones within the overall 1 zone. It's like a main zone, phosphor-hosted material, and a peripheral zone of silicate-hosted material, and that's new. Frankly, that is new information, which again takes the pendulum away from the ignorance towards the knowledge phase. And the metallurgists, you worry when there's new information, is it good or bad? But the initial work is that it's fine. Things are progressing as they should from our internal consultant.
Okay, jumping around a little bit here, but can you provide, and you did actually touch on this in the presentation, but can you provide a little bit more details on the recently announced inferred MRE for coarseness, and sort of how significant is this for the company?
So I think, and I believe this for the last well, since 2007, being a managing director of companies, is you need to not craft or warehouse information. You need to push it out as soon as possible for the people who own the company, the shareholders. So I don't like saying, oh, it's too early to get the resource out, get more drilling, it's not big enough. Well, what is big enough? You know, you need to get the scope out there quickly. And my view is the resource was pleasingly robust at this early stage, because it could well have been half the size and half the grade, according to some commentators, or double, depending on which side of the things you're on. But it was a good, robust start. And importantly, the exploration target, which are controversial, some analysts loathe them, but we have to scope what's happening next. So it's a clear linear path. Shareholders are aware that we're trying to convert that exploration target to resource. So the thing I'd say is it's an interim step, like a mine where you have resource updates half yearly. We should at least aim to be doing the same thing, with the ultimate goal of being a mine-ready project.
Okay, well, just on that then, so what are the next steps for further exploration and resource expansion there?
So there's permitting in terms of probably expanding our tenement position, which we're already working on. So I'm not giving anything away there. There's a likelihood of additional drilling. Permitting is not an issue there, but yeah, there's likely to be more drilling, particularly in the north, from I'd say May or June onwards, depending on the internal competition with Slovakia, but I think it'll happen at Korsnäs. The metallurgy work will also be iterative and ongoing. There won't be just some metallurgy Bible that we push out next month. It'll be, this is what stage we're at. It's de-risked or it's risked, and we need to work on these areas, and that will be just ongoing as well. So it's not work for the sake of it, though. The end goal is a mining lease grant. So we also start the environmental permitting monitoring work. We're starting some of that now with the water, for example. And we have good local management in place. Very similar laws to Australia in terms of the period of time it takes to get a mining lease granted. So it's best to start that aggressively early. The other piece we look at with potentially is rehabilitation of the underground facility itself, dewatering, things like that. So they're sort of soft projects, but they should be thought about and discussed at an early stage. And there's plenty of internal, expertise in Finland. They're underground experts. And we would like to, in my view, this thing should be drilled out underground, flat out. It can be done from surface because it's so shallow as well. But we can't see at the moment any depth control on this. So the mineralisation continues at depth. There's not some vertical zonation you can see with gold deposit where it peters out. So I think there's a lot of work to be done from the bottom of the existing shaft onwards in the future. But that's a few years from now. So we should start working and thinking about it now.
Thank you. That kind of actually answered the next question that just come through. So I'll leave that. All right. So with the EU supporting your projects through the grants, which we did discuss, how do you see the company's role in the EU strategy for securing critical minerals?
Oh, look, we don't want to suggest that we're some sort of EU headline company, but we are part of the solution. The problem, of course, is supply. People are building a lot of processing plants without feed. So when you see, for shareholders of any company, if there's demand, you should try to supply that demand. And I think we're in the perfect position for that, particularly for the rare earths. Gold, silver is different. They're deep markets that nobody can manipulate or control. And we, particularly with gold, so we think that that's important to keep in any junior portfolio. We may partner some of that material with third parties. We may not, depending on the terms that we deem best for shareholders. But yeah, the future is really about, it's not tourism. We want to be in one of the best jurisdictions with one of the best commodities. However, with experience, you also crave simplicity. So I like also a simple resource outcome. That's also the case. It's a planar body at Jockey Kangas, and we avoid geological PhDs, if you like, on difficult projects. So for me, a simple, large-scale growth is the best thing for shareholders.
Okay, we've just done that. So Jockey Kangas, do you want to just elaborate, how was he saying? Elaborate on the hafnium and the niobium. I think they're talking about the potential there. Do you want to maybe just provide some insights on what you're seeing?
Sure. So look, all projects should be underwritten, if you like, by mainstream elements, the main rare earth elements, and they are slightly boutique. Hafnium, to a lesser extent, niobium. You've seen the success in West Australia, other companies such as WA1. Basically, they're planar bodies that are wide open. There's even, and we flagged this in the last information pieces, there's high gallium here and there. So we need to bring that project up to the same stage at coarseness. I've been to the field there. Again, it's a few meters cover, flat land, tracks everywhere, easy to develop, largely municipal land as well, so amenable to the work. Our head office, for want of a better word, which is a little name on an accountant's office, is in Oulu nearby, so operationally quite straightforward. The hafnium price is a function of the smallness of the market, I guess. So it is jerking upwards a lot. This has basically run out, such as antimony with other companies. So, of course, we don't ignore that, and we think it's topical and should be spoken about, but it is underwritten by the total rare earth oxides.
Thanks, Jason. There are a couple of questions just about Yoki Kangas, but perhaps if you want to maybe just elaborate a little bit more on the rationale behind the project, the recent expansion, and perhaps what's going on for the program of work for 2025.
So you're referring to Jockey Kangas, right? Not coarseness? Yeah. So Jockey Kangas we estimate at least 48 holes that haven't been looked at for rare earths right through the middle of the new expanded ground position. We surrounded a vanadium project, which is not of interest to us, but they're good people. But we're going to basically do what we did with coarseness, arrange a resampling job and send it all to the lab. And so there'll be news flow in terms of drill assays from Jockey Kangas. Then I think, well, depending on what happens with the numbers, you hope to progress as we did to coarseness to resource. So it's basically the reason it's exciting because, again, it hasn't been done, and it's just sitting in the facility, well preserved by GTK. The staff members at the GTK facility are probably a little bit worried we're going to throw 200 holes at them to cut again, but there are contractors we can use as well to expedite that up at Chemi. The good people at Pulsatec OY helped us last time to get this out in a timely manner because we don't want to be we appreciate the patience of current shareholders and hanging on while these numbers have come out. But there's about to be literally a wall of about 800 numbers come at them shortly, assays, and we want to keep that momentum going for the rest of the year.
Thank you, Jason. And we are running over, but I've just seen a question here mentioning Trump. Perhaps you might want to elaborate a little bit more on how the new president and tariffs might affect a company operating in Scandinavia, such as Prospech.
Yeah, so some listeners may know that the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States poured a lot of hot money or subsidy money into projects, some economic, some not economic, some critical minerals, some less than critical. So perhaps that flow will stop somewhat in the US or slow down or be moderated. The competitive subsidy program in the EU put together by Commissioner van der Leyen was the CRMA, or the Critical Raw Materials Act, is benefit. We are, I think, directly, it's via the EU fund RemHub, we're a beneficiary of that. So even though it might be moderated somewhat in the US, I still say a lot of hot money, or I should say more respectfully, taxpayer money will go towards projects, particularly on, again, the supply side, because in the news, there are a lot of processing plants that have been built that rely on Chinese raw material, which is sometimes it happens. It's easy to build a plant. You know how to put the Lego pieces together. It's not so easy to process or to build a mine and define a resource, arguably. So we're in a sweet spot in that regard. I think that there'll be more EU money that competes with the US, but also, more importantly, and this is what people don't discuss, is the enormous Chinese subsidies for Chinese producers, which are arguably going to continue. And we think that why not be part of that? Shareholders are open-eyed about what jurisdiction we're in. We don't think the business should survive because of subsidies. it survives because of the projects. But if the subsidies are there, then obviously we'll be front and centre.
Thanks for that, Jason. I know we are running over time, but just one more question. So, how would you compare Prospect's projects in the scheme of things compared to other Scandinavian sites?
So I think tonnes and grade is the first thing that you think about. Maybe you would argue jurisdiction, although we're in a known mining safe area. There's third parties in jurisdictions in Europe who are having disputes, for example, with the federal governments, and that's not the way we roll. We're not a leader in any jurisdiction. We follow others because we're a small company. We don't expose shareholders to lawyer risk, as I call it. We only expose shareholders to exploration and tonnage grade risk. And so for me, it is a competition, but we're trying to dominate, if you like, the rare earths plays in Finland. There's larger companies there, state-owned enterprise to the east that we don't own, obviously, but we want to compete and even work with those people. So, yeah, no, I think the main thing is that shareholders should know there is a vision of not a monopoly, but an oligopoly or whatever it's called, a two-way path for shareholders to be exposed to a long-term supply solution.
Wonderful. As I mentioned, we have run over time here today, but I want to thank you all for joining us for the investor webinar. There will be a recording that will be made live on our website in the coming days. And if we've missed any of your questions, please feel free to reach out via the contact details on the bottom of our ASX releases. But thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Jane, and your team. Thank you.